Chomsky now is, I mean, he looks like Father Death. I mean, he's quite old. He must be in his 90s at this stage. I mean, he was old in the 90s, so it's now 20 years later. So this is, he is very old. But the problem is that, well, I don't know how much I can really blame an old person for this, but he's increasingly and across the decades of existence been narrowed down from sort of a worldview that wanted to engage with the world, then it just sort of like tired talking points. And now he's only wheeled on to go up against dirtbag leftists to get them to vote for Democrats because the threat of climate change is just so extreme that you can't do anything but vote for Democrats. Vote blue no matter who. Don't think, just vote for Democrats. That's all you can do, because thinking runs the risk of apocalypse. It runs the risk of apocalypse. This has been the theme of the entire month. You could literally see their messaging transition from Ukraine. I mean, that was, I think, a long time coming. We knew this transition was coming. I think the Project Veritas even recorded one of the CNN top execs saying this exact thing, saying that, oh, well, in summer we're going to transition from the war on Ukraine to the narrative of global warming. We've got all the stories lined up. We've got Greta Thunberg booked for this period regardless, and so we're going to do that. But this is that's all Chomsky can do, is just wheel out a defense of the cathedral. It kind of reminds me of the Homer's depiction of the afterlife, and that's always what it seems that the modern left has become. It's not just Chomsky's age; it's that in his age he's reached the mental level of almost every other left-wing professor. The new 20-year-old left-wing professors that are coming in and filling colleges and filling lecture halls and educating the new generation of our youth. Those guys are all at the same mental stage as Chomsky, where they can only repeat again and again the lines that they were taught. We must give more power to the cathedral. We must give more power to the managerial state, guys. If we don't give more power to the managerial state, Adolf Hitler will come back. Everyone will be in the trenches. Global warming will burn up the world. Racism, lynching will come back. Homophobia will come back. Every bad thing imaginable will happen unless you give more power to the cathedral. There's no intellectual process to this. There's no intellectual interrogation of the premises. It's just a repetition. It's just sort of dead words floating on and on and on. The thing I kind of want to focus in on is just the reactions, the kind of intellectual journey that a bunch of formerly, maybe still progressive, but formerly leftist, bourgeoisie, professional managerial types, what is their mind's intellectual journey as they witness these events play out one after the other? They must at some level understand that they're consuming an entertainment product. They must at some level realize that this is bullshit, that they're being fed bullshit lines one after the other to basically prop up a narrative. And they must understand that the ultimate fool in this game, despite how much they might feel like they're part of the con on social media, the ultimate fool of the game is them. The incredible slowness at which the whole process develops. You have to watch them piece together every piece of the puzzle one after the other, because their number one programming, the number one piece of ideological programming is to disbelieve anyone who points out the obvious facts about the nature of the apparatus that they themselves are participating in or still do participate in. The sublime beauty of watching boomers interact with sort of the gender people. They understand, they see sort of like the gender non-conforming people, what some people might call the gender goblins. The type, the late onset transitioners, the non-binaries. And they understand very, very readily in our heart of hearts that this is wrong, that this is going nowhere good, but also that in some sense these people are ideologically their own children. This is the product of the ideology that they fed. And watching them kind of interact with that has this very aesthetic dimension to it. Less so the Xers, who I think are just checking out right now. Everywhere, sort of the sensation that you're surrounded by rot. You're surrounded by things that are unhealthy and are ready to give way and are ready to kind of burn around you. Dry bones propped up a living future. But in the new reality where we live, the death is not below us, it's above us. It's above us, bearing down like a burden. We are people who are buried in the living dead, in the dead that have not burned off their mortal coils. And everyone's kind of anticipating some disaster happening. The living bear up the forms of the dead who have not died. And the society is organized not to essentially make the generations of the past hold up the generations of the future, but have the generations of the future hold up the carcasses of the generations that have gone before. And this is sort of the world turned upside down. This is sort of the world that we're occupying, and all these kind of mindless people who are going through life. And you see these horrible things that are going on in our own world, and people who, like Noam Chomsky, can't engage with them, or like Vosh won't engage with them. And you see, or you see just modern Xers and millennials just tapping out and saying, this world is only about what pleasure I can take from it. This world is only about sequestering myself in my little bubble for as long as I can. I'm going to entomb myself so that whatever I have can last longer, and not be swept away by the deluge of the world that we've brought forth and we no longer understand. And so that's the world. That's the world of the upside down. It's not the world of sort of the oppression of the literal dead, although there's some amount of that as well. It's a world where the living are oppressed by the living dead. I'm kind of struggling to imagine the millennial who can't see how the game's done at this stage. Jon Stewart is a really despicable individual, and so is Stephen Colbert. I'm kind of ashamed that he's Catholic to a certain degree. He wears his Catholicism on his sleeve, but the guy is a complete and utter asshole. He hid this expertly for years and years and years and years and years, behind a facade of being a copy of Bill O'Reilly. I remember him being interviewed on Fresh Air, I think, when he was still a correspondent on The Daily Show. And he made fun of he was in the writer's room. He was brought in as a correspondent for the Republican convention in 2004, before The Daily Show was really well known. And he made fun of all the writers there who wrote the speeches for the night, that their careers were peaking. Kind of a very cruel way to mock writers from one way to another. From one writer to another, but the guy exists basically to laugh at the plebeians. That's his entire shtick. That appears to be a large percentage of his personality, to the point where in 2022 he's literally laughing at inflation bankrupting the middle class because he drives a Tesla. Apropos of cheerleading a war that he has absolutely no stake in and no desire to fight in, nor any desire to see his children fight in. It's disgusting. And unless we remember Jon Stewart's little stunt with the anti-whiteness. Of course, he completely humiliated Andrew Sullivan, who, for his own purposes, completely deserved it. But just the shit-eating grin he constantly flashes at the camera, this grin, and to imagine, initially, the knowing kind of shit-eating grin you got from The Daily Show was, yeah, things are bad, I know you're bad, and we're experiencing them together. But now, what is Jon Stewart's gig? His people are in power. We know Jon Stewart's in power. We know that he has the ear of everyone who matters in a big way. And that, the people who follow him are just kind of hoi polloi that clamp like seals and validate his opinions and give him the power to justify himself as an influencer. You're not in on the joke. You are the joke. And every time I see Jon Stewart, I can't help but think about that. Who doesn't see through this at this stage? I guess a whole class of millennials just don't see through this. They don't see through the fact that you're the joke of Jon Stewart's joke. That's the problem. The joke is on you, and this is the problem with radical centrists as well. They don't understand that making fun of progressives. I mean, it's fun. It's sort of cathartic. I don't want to knock anyone their laughs, but ultimately, they're dispossessing us while we're laughing at them. So this has to be a laugh with a certain amount of tragic depth to it, lest you're totally betraying what's actually going on. But of course, the laughs that Jon Stewart tries to encourage his fans to have are condescending laughs, are sadistic laughs, are laughs of people who figured everything out and who are going to be the rulers of the world. Well, they're not going to be the rulers of the world, and Jon Stewart is going to be a ruler of the world. And I wonder how much that facades. I mean, I guess we're really at the threshold, right? We're at the threshold where millennials are moving from their 30s to their 40s. And when you're in your 40s and you're in the place where most millennials find themselves in their early 40s, you kind of have to come to terms with the fact that you're not going to rule the world and that you're more or less an ordinary person. I've had to come to terms with this. Most people who are mature have to come to terms with this. But for millennials, the sting is going to be particularly acute because their entire cultural consumption habits up until this point have been predicated on that not being the case. They are not the ordinary person. They are somebody above the ordinary person. And if they are the ordinary person, they're going to tear down the system rather than to concede to those points.